when the stars spoke in the language of strangers. The sky above Earth was never truly silent, but most had forgotten how to listen. Long ago, before satellites filled the heavens and cities drowned the night in light, the stars had whispered softly, songs made of frequencies, pulses, and patterns. Humans called them signals once, and then static. Over time, they stopped paying attention. But in a quiet observatory in the middle of the Karakoram range, one woman still listened. Her name was Dr. Amina Rafiq. She was a linguist who had once studied ancient languages, Sanskrit, Sumerian, and forgotten dialects from before empires fell. But her obsession had shifted from old tongues of earth to the cosmic silence beyond it. She believed language could exist in any form, vibration, color, or light. Every night, she sat alone in front of her telescope and the hum of her translation machines, mapping the stars' frequencies. They pulsed like heartbeats, some steady, some broken. She logged them into her notebooks, as though she were collecting words. One evening, a sudden anomaly blinked across her screen, a series of rhythmic flashes from a distant region of space near the Orion Nebula. Not random, not natural. They formed repeating intervals, mathematical symmetry that no star should make on its own. She froze. The pattern repeated 3 times, then stopped. "Is anyone else seeing this?" she whispered into the empty observatory, but the mountains swallowed her voice. Amina recorded the signal and replayed it, running it through her translation program. The machine converted it into sound, sharp pulses, then pauses. To anyone else, it would sound like interference. But to her, it felt like syllables trying to form. As she listened closer, the sounds began to resemble something like breathing, slow, deliberate, patient. It wasn't a signal meant to travel fast. It was waiting to be heard. She spent the next few nights studying it, comparing frequencies, mapping them onto linguistic structures. To her astonishment, the pattern fit the same logic as proto-languages, the way humans once formed meaning before words were written. "This isn't mathematics," she murmured, heart racing. "It's the language." And then came the first moment that changed everything. At 3:17 a.m., while the world slept beneath her, the stars above shifted, not their position, but their pulse. The same region flared again, but this time, the signal responded to her own frequency. The translation machine, still recording, began to hum back in synchrony. It was as if the stars were answering her. Days passed without rest. Amina stopped eating properly. She barely spoke to her colleagues at the institute. When they asked about her research, she brushed them off. "It's just background radiation," she lied. But inside, she knew the voice in the data was growing clearer. Every night, the stars would pulse, and she would send tones back. At first, they mimicked. Then they changed. The responses were becoming more intentional. One night, she translated the rhythm into light using her laser projector, sending a coded beam skyward. She didn't expect a reply. But the nebula pulsed again, in the same rhythm she had just sent. It was no longer a coincidence. It was conversation. Amina began to write the signals as if they were poetry. 3 pulses, 1 pause. 2 slow waves, a long silence. A flare that dies, then returns. It was the language of strangers, yet strangely intimate, like a heartbeat echoing from across eternity. She didn't understand the meaning yet, but she felt emotion in it, sorrow, patience, longing. Perhaps it wasn't a call for attention. Perhaps it was a memory trying not to fade. Weeks later, the world caught wind of her discovery. An encrypted email from an unknown address reached her inbox. Subject: "You are not the first to hear them." From Project Aeon. The message contained coordinates, a desert facility in Namibia, and a note. "They've been speaking for decades. We need you." Amina hesitated. She had never shared her data with anyone. But the signals were becoming harder to interpret. They were growing denser, filled with layers of harmonics that no machine could translate alone. So she went. The flight took her across continents, over the Indian Ocean, to a barren landscape of red sand and abandoned satellites. A small convoy awaited her, led by a tall, quiet man in a dark uniform who introduced himself simply as Commander Elias Voss. "We've been listening too," he said as they drove toward the facility. "Only difference is, we know where it's coming from." They entered a cavernous chamber deep underground, walls lined with screens and glowing constellations. In the center, a spherical projection of the Orion Nebula hovered midair, alive with pulsing lights. "These," Elias said, pointing to the flickers, "are not natural stellar emissions. They're transmissions." "Who sent them?" Amina asked, unable to breathe. He hesitated. "That's what we want to know. But our computers can't decode it. You, apparently, already started to." Amina approached the projection. The same pulse sequence she had recorded echoed faintly through the speakers. She smiled. "They're not random. They're forming patterns that resemble grammar." Elias frowned. "You're saying the stars are speaking?" She looked up at the lights above them. "Not the stars. Something through them." That night, they played back every transmission gathered over the last 50 years. Some were weak, some powerful, but all came from the same region, a small cluster behind the Orion Nebula, known as IC 434, the Horsehead Veil. As Amina listened, she realized the signals had evolved. They began simple, tones and pauses, but over decades, they had become more complex, almost melodic, as though something was learning to speak. "What if they're imitating us?" she asked Elias. "Or remembering us," he replied quietly. Amina frowned. "Remembering?" He turned off the projection. "Our predecessors believed these signals weren't from another civilization, but from us, from a forgotten age when humanity reached the stars." She stared at him. "You think these are echoes of an ancient human language?" "Echoes," Elias said, "or warnings." That night, while the others slept, Amina returned to the signal room. She turned on the translator and sent one simple tone, a pattern she had come to think of as hello. Moments later, the system flickered. The stars answered again. But this time, there were images embedded within the frequency, fragments of data her computer struggled to reconstruct. Slowly, shapes emerged on the screen, a planet surrounded by a glowing ring, a city of light beneath a dying sun, and symbols carved into stone. She gasped. The symbols matched her notes, the same rhythmic structure, the same syntax. It wasn't just a message. It was a story. The stars weren't only speaking. They were remembering. As dawn broke over the desert, Amina stepped outside, exhausted but wide-eyed. The horizon burned gold. For a moment, she felt as though the stars above were breathing in sync with her. She whispered softly, "Who are you?" And in the still air, the translator inside the lab glowed once more. A single line of decoded text appeared on the monitor. "We're the ones who forgot how to die." The words on the monitor pulsed like a heartbeat. "We're the ones who forgot how to die." Amina stared at the message until her vision blurred. Every instinct as a linguist, a scientist, screamed that this was impossible. Yet the syntax, the rhythm, even the pauses, they carried structure. Intention. Memory. Commander Elias Voss entered quietly. The dim light from the screens reflected in his eyes. "You saw it too," he said. Amina nodded slowly. "They used language, not numbers. This isn't just a code." He folded his arms. "Then who sent it?" She hesitated. "Not who. What?" For the next 3 days, the desert facility buzzed with sleepless energy. Every system was redirected toward decoding the transmissions. Engineers, linguists, astronomers, all worked under Amina's guidance. But something about the signal was alive. Each time they analyzed it, it changed slightly, as if it were adapting, responding to their efforts to understand it. Amina began to think the signal wanted to be interpreted, but only by someone willing to listen, not command. She played the newest data through the translator. This time, the waveform produced not only light and sound, but faint echoes of human-like voices, layered, overlapping, as though thousands were whispering in unison from across eternity. "We forgot the warmth of our own sun," the voices said. "We built eternity, and it became our tomb." Elias froze. "Are those human words?" They're being formed through the signal, Amina said. It's using our phonetic models, copying them, like a child repeating what it hears. Later, in her private quarters, Amina couldn't sleep. She stared through the glass ceiling at the bright strip of the Milky Way. She thought about the line, "We are the ones who forgot how to die." What kind of being could forget death? Only one that had lived too long. She opened her notebook and began writing what she knew so far. The signal comes from IC 434, near the Orion Nebula. It mimics linguistic evolution. It transmits memory, visual, emotional, not just data. It refers to us as something that once lived under a sun. She underlined that last line 3 times. Then, almost without thinking, she whispered, "If you can hear me, who are you really?" Her terminal lit up. The translator, though she hadn't activated it, responded with a low hum, soft, like breath. Then a voice came through the speakers. Not synthetic. Not alien. Human. "We are your future, forgotten by your past." Amina's heart nearly stopped. The next morning, she burst into the control room. Elias was reviewing radiation maps when she played the recording. He listened, silent and pale. "That's not a playback artifact," he said finally. "It's genuine modulation." "They spoke," Amina said. "Not a signal, a voice." Elias took a long breath. "Then we're speaking to something that calls itself us." He turned toward the window, where dawn was bleeding across the dunes. "You know what this means?" Amina shook her head. "It means," he said softly, "somewhere out there, a version of humanity might still exist, far older than we ever imagined. Maybe they went to the stars and never came back." Project Aeon's archives went deeper than Amina expected. In the hidden files, she found old records from the 2080s, long before her birth. They spoke of a deep Exodus initiative, a mission that had launched a fleet of generation ships to the edge of the Orion Arm. The goal had been survival, humanity's attempt to escape the dying Earth. No one had ever returned. The project was declared a failure. Lost in time, forgotten. But the dates matched the first known pulse of the signal. Her hands trembled. The voice from the nebula was an alien. It might be human, or what humanity had become. That night, the facility received another transmission, stronger than any before. The signal contained a repeating structure, a pattern of 10 pulses, like the beat of a heart. Amina's algorithms translated it into fragments of text. "We crossed the edge of light. We made worlds from memory. But time unmade us. We speak now because silence became unbearable." Elias whispered, "It's a message across millennia?" Amina leaned closer. "No, it's a confession." The next signal was not in text or sound, but in images, data compressed into light. When decoded, it revealed scenes that stole their breath. A city floating among the stars, filled with crystal towers and rivers of luminescence. Humans, or what looked like them, walking beneath a fractured sky. Their bodies shimmered as though half made of light, half matter. And then, destruction. A surge of radiation, a dark wave spreading through the void, consuming everything. At the center of the collapse stood a single figure, tall, luminous, unyielding, staring toward the stars, as if pleading with them. Amina whispered, "Who is that?" The screen flickered, and a single phrase appeared beneath the image. "The keeper of the last voice." Days blurred together. Amina stopped keeping track of time. The transmissions were accelerating. It was as if the stars themselves were awakening, shedding their centuries of silence. She began noticing patterns within patterns, recursive codes that folded over themselves like DNA. The signals contained layers of meaning hidden beneath sound and light. It was language built to survive extinction. But as they decoded deeper, something unsettling emerged. The transmissions carried fragments of consciousness, echoes of thought. When played through the translator, they induced dreams. Scientists who listened for too long began reporting visions, memories that weren't their own. Amina herself dreamt of standing on a planet that wasn't Earth, watching twin suns rise over a sea of glass. She felt the warmth of a wind that never existed, the weight of memories she had never lived. When she woke, she whispered, "They're not just sending words. They're sending themselves." Elias confronted her later. "The others are frightened. They say the signal is changing their minds." "It's not changing us," Amina said softly. "It's remembering us through us. Like we're vessels, pieces of the same language." He frowned. "That's not poetic, Doctor. That's dangerous." But she could see the truth in his eyes. He'd begun dreaming too. On the fifth night, a storm swept over the desert. Lightning clawed the horizon, and power flickered across the base. The signal surged with it, stronger than ever before. Amina ran to the control room. Screens flashed with waves of golden light. The translator spun out of control, its circuits glowing like fire. She shouted over the wind, "Shut it down." Elias hesitated. "If we do, we lose everything." The machines roared, filling the air with a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through their bones. And then, in the chaos, a new message appeared, clear, deliberate, written in both human and stellar script. "The Keeper is awake." And beneath it, coordinates. "Not in space. On Earth." The storm ended as suddenly as it began. The stars returned, glittering with cold innocence. But Amina couldn't look away from the screen. The coordinates pointed to a valley deep in northern Greenland, an old research site abandoned decades ago. She turned to Elias. "They're calling us there." He stared at the numbers, then back at her. "If this is real, we're standing on the edge of something far bigger than language." Amina nodded. "Maybe it's not about communication anymore." He frowned. "Then what is it about?" She looked up at the stars. Remembrance. That night, before they departed, Amina recorded one last message to the stars. "You say you are the ones who forgot how to die. If death is forgetting, then we'll remember you. Show us what we became." She sent the message through the transmitter. For a long time, nothing answered. Then the nebula flared once more, soft, like the closing of an eye. The translator printed one final line. "Then come. The language will remember itself through you." The helicopter cut across the endless white of northern Greenland. The world below was nothing but frozen silence, mountains of ice, rivers locked in time, and the faint shimmer of auroras curling across the dark horizon. Amina sat by the window, her face pale in the cold light. She had not slept for almost 2 days. The coordinates from the stars had pointed here, a forgotten valley at the edge of the Arctic Circle, where no living thing had walked in decades. Elias sat across from her, his jaw tight. "You're sure this is where they want us to go?" She nodded. The message was precise. "The Keeper is here." He gave a bitter smile. "A voice from the stars, buried under ice. Sounds like myth." "Everything was myth," Amina whispered, "until we started hearing them. When they landed, the air was sharp enough to cut. The research site was a grave of steel. Old domes crushed by ice, antennae bent by time. A single structure still stood, a tower half buried in snow, its top blinking faintly with a dying red light. They entered through a frozen hatch. Inside, the air was stale, but the walls hummed faintly with hidden power. It shouldn't have been possible. The base was abandoned nearly a century ago. Elias brushed frost from a wall panel and stared. "There's power here. A generator maybe, or something else." Amina's fingers traced a line of symbols carved into the metal, identical to those found in the star transmissions. "This place, it's connected." She switched on her handheld translator. The device flickered, then emitted a faint pulse of golden light. The symbols on the wall responded, glowing softly, like veins awakening beneath ancient skin. Amina whispered, "They've been waiting." The deeper they went, the louder the hum became. At the base of the facility, they found a sealed door of black metal. It wasn't part of human architecture. The design was too smooth, too alive. The symbols upon it pulsed in rhythm with Amina's heartbeat. Elias lifted his rifle instinctively. "What if it's dangerous?" She looked at him calmly. "Then it's the danger that called us." The translator emitted a single tone, the same frequency, as the star's first message. The door shuddered, then slowly split open, releasing a breath of warm air scented faintly of ozone. Beyond was a circular chamber, filled with light. At its center stood a tall column of crystal, surrounded by dormant machinery. Inside the crystal, suspended, motionless, was a human figure. Amina stepped closer, heart pounding. The figure was neither man nor woman. Its skin shimmered like glass, its eyes closed as if in sleep. The body seemed half organic, half light, as though reality itself could not decide what it was made of. Elias whispered, "Is that a person?" Amina nodded slowly. "Or what's left of one." The translator in her hand began to glow. A soft tone filled the air, a harmonic resonance that matched the chamber's hum. The figure inside the crystal opened its eyes. Golden. Alive. Amina froze. The being looked at her, not with hostility, but with recognition, as though it had been waiting for this exact moment, this exact face. A voice echoed through the chamber, not spoken aloud, but directly into their minds. "You came. The memory still breathes." Elias stumbled back. Who are you?" The being turned its gaze toward him. "I am the keeper of the last voice. The language you hear through the stars, it was mine to guard." Amina stepped closer. "Are you human?" The being's eyes flickered. "Once, when time still remembered flesh." The keeper spoke not with words but with impressions, images, emotions, sounds that formed meaning inside their thoughts. They saw visions of humanity's far future, the age of the stellar ascendants. A time when humans no longer died but transferred consciousness into the fabric of light itself. A civilization that stretched beyond galaxies, building eternal bodies from energy and memory. But eternity had its cost. "We became language without meaning," the keeper's voice said. "We built forever, but forgot the silence that gave it value. We became echoes of ourselves, and we lost death, which was our only teacher." Amina trembled. "You sent the signals because you wanted us to remember you." "No," the keeper said softly. "We wanted to remember ourselves. You are the seed we left behind, the last fragment of what it meant to be human." Elias stared in disbelief. "You're saying we, people on Earth, are the past of your kind?" The keeper's light dimmed slightly, as though in sorrow. "You are our beginning. We are your forgetting." Amina stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. "Why send the messages now? After all this time?" The keeper lifted a hand toward the ceiling. Above them, the chamber's metal skin peeled back, revealing the endless night sky. The stars burned bright and cold, each one pulsing in faint unison, like a network of living eyes. "The stars are dying," the keeper said. "When the last light fades, so will we. But memory cannot vanish if it is shared." Elias frowned. "So you reached back, through time?" "Through language," the keeper said. "Time and meaning are one. Every word ever spoken changes the shape of the universe. Every listener carries eternity in their breath. You, Amina Rafiq, heard the echo because you were meant to speak it again." Amina felt her chest tighten. "You're saying, I'm part of this?" "You always were. The signal found you, because your voice was once part of ours." She whispered, trembling, "I don't understand." "You will." Suddenly, the translator in her hand vibrated violently. Streams of light poured from it, connecting her to the crystal. The hum grew louder, deeper, until it filled her entire body. Elias shouted, "Amina, stop." But she couldn't. The light surrounded her, warm and weightless. Visions flooded her mind, lifetimes she had never lived. She saw herself walking through alien cities of glass, speaking in voices made of light, shaping constellations with her hands. She saw her own reflection, older, endless, the same face as the keeper. Amina gasped. She fell to her knees, tears freezing on her cheeks. The keeper's voice whispered gently in her mind. "You are the one who chose to return, to be human again, to bring language back to its origin. You are the bridge between the stars and their silence. Amina sobbed. Then why can't I remember? Because remembrance is pain. You ask to forget, to learn what it means to die once more. Elias rushed to her side, pulling her back as the light dimmed. The keeper's glow softened, fading toward stillness. Amina looked up at it, trembling. What happens now? You will speak for us, said the keeper. When the last star burns out, only one tongue will remain, the language that remembers love, loss, and ending. Speak it, and the universe will begin again. The light inside the crystal flickered. The keeper's form began to dissolve, scattering into particles that rose into the air like embers. Its voice echoed softly. We forgot how to die. You will teach us how to live again. And then it was gone. Silence filled the chamber. The translator went dark. Only the cold hum of the wind above remained. Elias helped Amina to her feet. What did it mean? Begin again. She stared at the crystal, now empty. The stars aren't just dying, they're waiting for us to speak. He frowned. Speak what? She looked up at the sky through the open ceiling, the stars flickering faintly like distant thoughts. The language they taught me, she whispered. The one that isn't made of words. Outside, the aurora danced across the horizon. Amina raised her hand, holding the translator. She tapped the pattern, the first message she had ever received. The stars pulsed back instantly. It wasn't just a response. It was recognition. Elias stared in awe. They're listening to you. No, Amina said softly. They're remembering me. That night, beneath the cold light of the aurora, Amina recorded one final entry in her notebook. Language is not what we say. It is what survives when everything else ends. The stars spoke in the language of strangers, but maybe the strangers were always us, trying to find our way home. She closed the notebook, looked at the sky, and whispered, Then let's go home. The world did not change overnight. It began with small things, faint disturbances in satellite signals, strange harmonics in the cosmic background, whispers in the electromagnetic fields that scientists could not explain. But Amina Rafiq knew. She sat in the Greenland facility's command room, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines still running on energy they did not fully understand. The translator rested on her lap, glowing faintly, a pulse that matched her heartbeat. Elias entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee. His eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. It's spreading, he said. Observatories all over the planet are picking up similar patterns. The same frequency as your last transmission. Amina nodded. It's not just a signal anymore. It's language being reborn. He frowned. Reborn? Or released? She looked at him and smiled faintly. Does it matter? It's alive. Outside, the world began to stir with confusion and awe. Astronomers reported constellations blinking in sequences, as if the stars were communicating. Radio operators intercepted soft voices hidden inside static, whispers repeating fragments of forgotten words. Children in remote villages looked up at the sky and claimed they could hear music when they closed their eyes. No one understood it, but everyone felt it, a vibration beneath existence, a pulse beneath thought. News stations called it the resonance phenomenon. Governments panicked. Religions divided. But Amina felt only calm, because the stars had started speaking again, in the language of strangers that was no longer strange. One night, she and Elias stood outside under the wide, pale sky. The translator hummed quietly, projecting small streams of light that rose into the air like fireflies. Elias broke the silence. You believe the keeper was telling the truth, that this is us, speaking from some forgotten future? Amina gazed at the stars. Yes, but not just us. Everything that ever was us. Our memories, our fears, our stories. They became part of the universe's own voice. He sighed. And now that voice is waking. She turned to him. And it's looking for meaning. That's why it found me. He smiled faintly. Then what happens when it finds what it's looking for? Amina's eyes shone softly in the aurora's light. Then we'll remember who we are. The following weeks were filled with both wonder and dread. The resonance grew stronger. Oceans began to reflect light patterns that no one could explain. Plants responded to unseen rhythms, blooming out of season. Even human dreams changed. Entire cities reported seeing the same visions, glowing cities under twin suns, voices of light speaking in harmony. It wasn't a plague. It was remembrance spreading through reality. And at the center of it all was Amina. Every time she touched the translator, the stars brightened slightly. Every message she sent was answered. Each pulse built upon the last, a conversation growing in complexity and emotion. Elias began keeping count. Do you realize you've exchanged over 1,000 transmissions now? The last one lasted 8 hours. That's more than communication. That's communion. Amina smiled faintly. It's not about words anymore. It's about memory. Then one day, the stars changed. The pattern stopped. The sky became still. No pulses, no whispers. The entire network of cosmic light fell silent. Amina felt it instantly. A void, like losing a heartbeat she didn't know she shared. She sat alone in the control room, staring at the lifeless translator. They're gone, she whispered. Elias stood behind her. Maybe it's over. Maybe they finished what they started. No, she said, shaking her head. They're waiting. They said the language would remember itself through me. That means there's something left I haven't spoken. Elias looked uneasy. You think they want you to finish their message? Amina turned toward the screens, where faint data still scrolled, unreadable, flickering fragments of light. Not finish it, she said. Complete it. That night, the aurora returned, brighter, wider than ever before. Colors twisted across the sky like ribbons of liquid fire, painting the ice with shades of violet and gold. The translator began to vibrate again, softly at first, then stronger. Amina placed her hands on it. The hum filled her chest, her mind, her entire being. Elias called out from the doorway, Amina, it's reacting to you. She didn't hear him. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady. And then, from deep within the machine, a voice spoke, the keeper's voice. The memory is almost whole. One word remains. Amina whispered, What word? The first one you ever spoke. The one that made you human. Her mind swirled with images, laughter, sorrow, hope, loss. She saw humanity's first fires, the first names whispered between lovers, the first goodbyes. And then she understood. The word was love, not as a feeling, but as the binding between memory and meaning. She began to speak. At first, it was only a whisper, soft, trembling, uncertain. But the translator caught the tone, magnified it, and sent it upward in waves of light. Her voice carried across the frozen valley, rising into the sky. Each word became energy, each syllable a spark. Elias watched, frozen in awe, as the stars began to respond. The entire night sky shimmered. One by one, constellations flared into brilliance, their light-forming patterns, spirals, lines, and shapes that moved like living thought. It was as though the universe itself had begun to breathe. Across Earth, people stopped whatever they were doing. In every city, every desert, every ocean, humanity looked up. The stars were moving, writing something vast across the heavens. Children pointed. Elders wept. Musicians dropped their instruments because the very air was singing. For the first time in history, the world was united not by war or fear, but by a shared voice echoing through space. Amina's voice. Inside the control room, the translator glowed white-hot, the sound rising to a deep, melodic hum. Amina fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Elias tried to reach her, but the light surrounded her, gentle, protective, infinite. Her eyes opened, shining gold like the keeper's. Elias whispered, Amina? She smiled faintly. They're not gone. They're inside everything. Every atom remembers. He stared in disbelief. You mean the universe is alive? She nodded. It always was. We just forgot how to listen. Then came the final moment. The stars pulsed one last time, a great surge of light that spread outward, across the sky, across galaxies, across time itself. It was not destruction. It was awakening. The old language of the universe, the rhythm of creation, had found its voice again. Through her, Amina's body began to dissolve into streams of golden light. Elias shouted, "No! Stay with me." She reached out, touching his hand. "I'm not leaving, Elias. I'm remembering." Her touch was warm, filled with a strange peace. He felt her words rather than heard them. Every language ends in silence. But silence is just the space where new words are born. And then she was gone, her body scattering into 1,000 motes of light that rose into the sky, merging with the aurora. The translator dimmed. The hum faded. But above, the stars blazed brighter than ever, as though she had joined them. For days, Elias remained alone in the facility. The world outside continued to change. The resonance became part of nature, embedded in the ocean's tides, in the wind's whisper, in the way people dreamed. Amina's voice became legend. Her name became a symbol for unity, for remembering what it meant to be human. But for Elias, she wasn't legend. She was a friend, a teacher, a reminder that the universe was not cold or empty, but full of stories waiting to be spoken. One night, months later, he returned to the same spot outside the base where they had stood together under the aurora. He held the silent translator, staring at the stars. "Are you still there?" he asked quietly. The device flickered once, faint, but unmistakable. And in the soft wind, he heard her voice, not from the machine, but from the stars themselves. "Always." Elias smiled through tears. He looked up at the sky, now pulsing with rhythm once more. And far above, beyond the reach of time, the universe whispered in a voice that was both strange and familiar. "We spoke once in silence. Now we speak in light." The strangers were never strangers. They were us, learning how to listen again. The desert was utterly silent. Not even the wind dared to move. The ground beneath the facility had opened like a wound, a vast chamber stretching into darkness, with strange crystalline pillars rising from its depths. At the center hovered the ship, the Ark of Orion, its surface shimmering like glass and metal merged into one. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heart. Elias and Amina stood at the edge of the pit, staring down into history. "This thing," Elias whispered, "it's older than any record we have. And yet it feels awake." Amina stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the shimmering hull. "It's not metal," she said softly. "It's living code, the same frequencies as the signals. This ship is speaking." Elias frowned. "To us?" She shook her head. "Through us." They descended by lift into the chamber, surrounded by the hum of unseen energy. The air thickened, the gravity felt lighter, and strange shapes began to form in the haze, outlines of structures, people, memories.